Thank you for joining us today for Bids That Win. I wanted to start us off with a quote from RGV Construction. When they switched from spreadsheets, their business changed, basically. They found increased efficiency and productivity, and they were able to put together estimates in a fraction of the time. The key thing that leads to is that you can spend more time on the important details, the fine stuff that we can really provide value in, as opposed to the structural things of just setting up a bid. And that can drive profits, and that can help you win more jobs. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm your presenter, Patrick Reitz. I'm the product manager for B2W Estimate. I've been with B2W Software for 11 years now. And what I'm going to go over today is some things about why you'd want to change from Excel if that's what you're working with, and the advantage of going with a data-driven estimating package. Kind of cover the obvious things of the benefits of speed and accuracy, consistency, centralization, and integration. And then if we've got time at the end, I'll open it up to Q&A. So if you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to submit them, and our moderators will pass them on once I'm done with the rest of the presentation. So tell you a little bit about B2W Software. We were founded in 1993. Our original owner is still with us and guiding us. We are focused on heavy construction exclusively, and we have customers of all sizes, every specialty, all throughout the US and Canada. Our flagship product, the one that I'm responsible for, is B2W Estimate. It's a estimating tool that can help you speed up and be more accurate in your estimating process. Estimate was what the company started with, and we've grown from there. We've continued to do investments into Estimate, making it a better, stronger product, but we've also created a family of products around it, the one platform. That includes inform, schedule, maintain, track, basically covering the whole life cycle of a job, from first estimating it to win it, then schedule and track as you're working the job, maintain to help you keep your fleet up to date, and inform to cover your data collection needs like safety meetings and such. And all of those elements are unified and work together, providing you value throughout the whole life cycle. So one question we hear a lot is, what I'm doing works, why would I change? There's a lot of reasons for this. One common one is your company's growing. Processes that may work when you're a small company won't necessarily scale up well. You know, if you're working on napkins or just tablet paper, that's hard to grow and become bigger and have that still function as well as it did. Margins are tighter. Every year, it seems like it gets tougher and tougher. You've got less and less room, which means you need to make sure that you are being more accurate, because if you don't get your costs right, that could blow your profit completely. Competition is intensifying. It's a big deal to have the right information, to have the right costs, because if you don't, you know your customer's going to, or you know your competitor's going to, sorry, and that's going to put you in a bad position as you try to win bids against them. Jobs are getting larger and more complex. As your companies grow, you'll tend to take on bigger, more complicated jobs, and the very simple back of the napkin sort of approach or simple Excel spreadsheets may not be able to keep up with that. You want basically a purpose-built tool that can handle estimates of any size or complexity. Deadlines are tighter. One of the key features of Estimate is it lets you create and finish your bids faster, so that when you have less time to get the work done, you're still getting it done at the same level or a higher level of quality than what you were doing before. The other thing is being able to collaborate with multiple estimators. One disadvantage with Excel is you can really only have one person in the document at a given time. With Estimate, You can have as many estimators working on the estimate as you need, all working on different parts, and the software will make sure that you're not stepping on each other's toes and that all of your work is being saved properly. Knowledge retention. This is a big thing as we go forward. A lot of the customers we work with, you'll have estimators who've been on the job for 20, 30, 40 years. And as they retire, the companies wind up losing all of that information that those senior estimators have managed to develop. You need a way to let them transfer that into a format that younger estimators can take advantage of. And so that, as they move on, they've set stuff up so the next generation of estimators can be just as successful as they were. This is a huge one, preventing costly errors. I have talked to dozens of people at our user conference where getting the software paid for itself, because in one case I can remember off the top of my head, within the first week of using the software, they found an error that would have cost them $1 million. That paid for the software, their salary, 2 other estimators' salary. It basically paid for itself, and they found it as part of training. They were creating an estimate in Estimate that they'd already done on an Excel spreadsheet. The numbers came up different. They looked into it, and Estimate had helped them identify a mistake they'd made in the Excel spreadsheet that they're ready to go out to bid with. That alone, that kind of error can kill your business if you make too many of them. And Estimate can help save you from that. Another thing is centralization. By using a tool like Estimate, all of your estimates are kept in the same place. You always know where to find them. You don't have to worry that, is this file off on a laptop somewhere, or did I save it to this network drive or that network drive? Everything's all in the same place. You always know where to find it. And you can control and manage your data a lot better. And then standardization. One big thing about having your costs be repeatable and understandable is to bid the same sort of work the same way. So for any particular scope of work, being able to set up, this is how we would do it. This is what our crews would look like. This is the equipment we would use and the materials, and having that be consistent from one estimator to the next. It can be hard to do that when people are pulling numbers out of thin air, but if you can have a tool that lets you capture and validate where that information is coming from, you can see that things are being bid the same way, and that when you go to do the job, you understand what the assumptions were of how the work was going to be done. So what can change from that look like? Well, data-driven estimating is where you start with cost estimates that are based on verifiable data. And usually you'll manage them with proposal software, such as Estimate. The key elements to this are the software can help ensure accuracy and can help save you from the errors and mistakes that you might make. If the software is going to work for you, though, and one of the key things we try to make sure with Estimate is that it's easy to use. This needs to be something that's intuitive to you, and you're not going to spend a lot of time fighting to get the software to do what you want. That's why having something that's built with your industry in mind is key. The software needs to think like you do. You also want to have automation of data entry and workflows. To the greatest extent possible, if it's just something that's bringing in data or manipulating data, let the computer do that. That's what they're good for. What humans are good for is figuring out things like, what's the right production rate for this crew to be working at? There's decisions that only humans can make, and there's decisions that there's work that computers are a lot better at. Let the computers do that so that you can focus on what humans are good at. Supporting reusable data too. Once you've figured out how you do a scope of work, building a bridge, digging a tunnel, anything, once you figure that out once, you shouldn't have to keep figuring out every time you need to rebid it. You should be able to take what you figured out the first time and reuse that every time you're doing essentially the same work. Like I said, one of the things that can drive people towards software like this is being able to support multi-user access, meaning maybe two estimators need to work on the same estimate because it's a big one, or they have different areas of expertise. Maybe you want to have a senior estimator reviewing the work of a junior estimator, and they don't have to wait until the junior estimator's done. They want to see what they're doing as they do it. But being able to have multiple people in the system at the same time and have the system take care of not letting them step on each other's toes. The ability to analyze the data, especially through built-in reports that will let you see where your estimate's at, get summaries of where the balance of the costs are, and the ability to share that data, especially with external systems. Printing out a report is one thing, but being able to export the data to your accounting system or get it over to your field tracking system so the people who are actually doing the work can understand how the job was bid, so that they know like what targets they need to hit in order to make sure that you actually make the profit you expected to. And the last thing is you want software that's still being updated and improved. As new technologies come out, as new needs from the market come out, you want software that's continuing to grow. Any software that's not changing is basically dead. There's always ways that software can serve you better and take advantage of new tools and techniques to do things faster and quicker and easier. So those are things that focusing on a data-driven estimating solution can do for you. So I said, one of the key things is being faster and more accurate. And so we've got some case studies here from our various customers who speak to various aspects of what the Estimate solution's done for them. And for Jason at Epcor, he says we can bid in a fraction of the time. His typical variance in cost went from 20% to 2%. You can just see what the impact of that would be when they were able to tighten up their estimates to that degree and be able to rely on the estimate that much more. It means they can be that much more sure that the markups that they're putting in are actually accurate and they're going to get them. And it lets them be a lot more competitive. So one way that Estimate supports that is via centralizing resources. So you can estimate a lot faster, like I was saying, when things that you have to use repeatedly are defined once and then you just use them going forward. So Estimate has a library of costing resources from labor, equipment, crew templates, materials, miscellaneous. These are basically the smallest units of a bid. A labor type, you know what you're going to be paying an auger operator per hour. You know how much your CAT 650 is going to take to run. And we can also store the organizations that you work with consistently, so you don't have to keep re-pulling in all the information on their contacts and what their fax number is, all that sort of stuff. And then on an individual resource level, you can see for something like an excavation crew, this is just the template of what an excavation crew would be. So in general, this crew is going to have a CAT 550, a Bobcat, CAT 560, and then the various operators. All of these costs are baked in. You can put in some default production rates for this is what we would normally expect to see the crew do when they're doing cubic yards per day or square feet per production hour. And when you bring this into an estimate, what you'll get is a copy of this that if you then need to make more specific variations on, you can swap out the Bobcat for something else. You could increase the number of laborers with it to make it specific to how you think the work's going to be done in that particular scope of work in the estimate. We also have an item database for items that you bid repeatedly. Basically, once you've come up with the costing for something like trench excavation or stump grinding or any item that you see more than once on a bid form, you shouldn't have to figure it out again. Maybe you'll make variations to it in the estimate, but at least the core structure of the cost can all be predefined. For instance, for asphalt paving here, for this particular item, you can see I can go in here and I can define what the cost elements that make it up are. It takes a paving crew to do that. Here's what the contents of a paving crew look like. It takes these materials, and when I add this to an estimate, this will come in all pre-built for me. For our DOT customers, we have all of the US DOT databases, just a subset of that loaded here. Basically all the codes, all the descriptions, and you can build them out however you want. If this is typically work that you subcontract, you can specify that. If you want to detail out what the components that make up this cost are, you can do that. You can even just set it as a plug and say, yeah, this is really simple. It just always costs us, $100 a gallon or whatever, and just have that number in there. The flexibility and the level of complexity that you define stuff with is all up to you. It's basically meant to fit your needs. We don't tell you what something is. We let you make it what you feel it needs to be for your work. Also, for people who use work breakdown structures, we can support that as well. CSI master list is a common one, but any work breakdown structure that you may use, the hierarchical nature of it, as well as any particular cost elements that are needed to define a terminal level, the end of a structure, that can all be baked in, and you can add pieces of this to an estimate as you need. So back to another customer, Shannon at Priestley, doubled their monthly volume to about 100 bids and increased their win rate by 7%. So picture what that means. They're bidding twice as many bids, and in addition to that, as a percentage, they're winning even more. And that's because they could put more time and detail into making sure that the bids were profitable. So they were more bids, more wins, and better wins thanks to using this tool. And to give an example of how you can do more bids, let's start off with kind of a simple Excel file. So you might get something like this from the DOT. You got your item numbers, your descriptions, quantity, and a unit of measure. And sure, you could, on this table, go in and throw a bunch of prices at it, but there's not necessarily a lot of rhyme or reason to why those prices would exist. It would just be things that you know, or you could have a really complex thing worked out. But if someone messes up a formula somewhere or changes anything, you might not notice that there's anything wrong. But the thing is, even something like this, and the list can go on, rows and rows and rows. Even something like this can be very quick and easy to bid and estimate. So I'll show you what estimate looks like. We're in estimate now. We are in what's called the estimate detail tab of a brand new estimate. So right now, we have no pay items. We have no indirect items. Basically, there's nothing to this estimate. You can see the costs are all zero. So if I go up here to the Import Pay Items button, that pops me up into a wizard. Take me through the wizard. Now, we support a whole bunch of different formats that we can import from. Microsoft Excel is a very simple one, but as you can see, the different DOTs and several different other things have specific formats that they'll send their bid lettings out in. And so if you're in Minnesota and you work with the DOT, you can just select that and it'll understand what the file format is. So in this case, it's Excel. Now the next step is to say, maybe you want to just bring those rows in just as plain items. That's fine. Or if you've already done that work before, you might already have templates in your item database for each of those items. You might have already built those out with your cost structure and tail. So in this case, you can say, well, I've already got a New Hampshire DOT database. When you bring that Excel file in, automatically look in the database, see if any of the items match, and if they do, I want you to bring in a copy of the item from the database so that it's fully baked, fully costed out. So we do that. We tell it which file we want it to import. With when you bring in a file, the UMs could be in any sort of arrangement. If they're not a one-to-one match with what we have, if let's say acre shows up as A, you can let us know that A should be treated as acres. And if there is a match, we'll set that up for you and say, acre is acre, right? You agree? We'll tell you what we're gonna do as a result, and then all I have to do is click finish, and your entire estimate will come in. You see, we've got all the items from the Excel file, clearing and grubbing, removal of existing pipe, removal of guardrail, but they came in with the tasks, the crews, the trucking, the material, all of the data that you'd put in, all of the components that you'd put in to specify how this thing's cost is generated. And with that one click of the button, I went from having an estimate with no cost in it to I know this estimate's about $3.5 million. That in real time probably took 15, 20 seconds to get through. Now, does that mean that you're done and you can go? Maybe. Depends on how kind of standard the work is. Maybe you want to go into the grubbing crew and say, 4 acres per day. This is a particularly easy spot. I think we can get 5 acres per day, and that'll cut your costs down some. Or maybe you're looking at a lot harder of an area than you normally tackle, and you're like, we should back that off to 2 just to make sure that we're being reasonable about this, and that raises the cost a bit. But that's the kind of decisions that you as an estimator can make, and so that's what we're leaving in your hands and empowering you to do, is be able to think through the things that, as a human, as an estimator, as someone with knowledge and experience in the industry, you can make good, informed decisions about. And this lets you see what the impact of that decision is. As you change the grubbing crew's production rate, that'll change its cost, and that'll reflect here automatically. And so you'll see, wow, that didn't really have a big difference, or maybe it has a huge difference. The key thing is, a lot of the manual, repetitive work is just done for you immediately. And so you can do the stuff that really matters. That brings us to the next big point, and that's accuracy. Glenn from EPC says, I've seen people go bankrupt because of miscalculations. You can drop 10,000 here, 50,000 there. I mean, I'd like to pick up 10 or 50,000. And it's simple. You forget items or tasks. Maybe you leave something with a 0 quantity, and that's life or death for companies. That stuff will add up, tear away all your profit, and basically leave you in the red. And at this point, there's not a lot of companies that can afford to do that. Fortunately, we have a very simple tool that helps fix that. Above and beyond just an intense focus on making sure all of the calculations that the system does are always correct. That is one of the most important things we look for every time we make any change to the product is this going to have any calculation impact? If so, make 1,000% sure that there is no problem with it. But if you put numbers in that don't make sense, if you put a 0 quantity in, well, it's going to be a 0 cost coming out. We can't, that's the correct math. But maybe we can warn you about things like that. So there's a whole host of different Estimate Check Wizard results. These are various things that they're not even necessarily wrong. They're just things that you should be alerted to about your estimate before you send it in. Things like crew days are fractional. Maybe you set the production rate and the crew winds up having 5.21 days on the job. Okay, that's valid. You might want to go with that as the number, but is the crew really going to be working 5.21 days, or should you round that up to 6 or round it down to 5 and say, well, they should just get more done per day? It's something that we can't, it's not wrong. It's just something you need to be aware of and you need to make a conscious decision about. Same thing with a lot of the rest of these. Items have a plug cost method. That's not wrong, but it is something where maybe that means it just came in that way and you need to put more thought into it. Like you put that in as just a swag at what the overall total is going to be, and you meant to get back to it, but you didn't remember that you left 2 out of a couple hundred items still at the plug. So this tool can really go through the estimate and help you pick out the things you might have forgotten about or that might be missing. Equipment with a 0 value, labor burden has a 0 value. Maybe that's okay, but probably not. It's probably something you need to look for. And again, this kind of marries the best of what a computer can do and the best of what a human can do. The computer can detect scenarios that might be questionable, and the human can check that out and answer those questions. So Rob at Fiore gave us feedback on some change orders or change order functionality that we added. What we did was we added change orders as their own full-fledged feature within estimates. And so one of the things that allowed was he was able to capture his indirect costs that were otherwise being forgotten. So he'd put the estimate together, he'd come up with his PADMs, he'd come up with his indirects, but when it came time to do the change orders later, people weren't remembering that, hey, we still have these extra indirect costs that we need to account for. With the new feature, that's easy to do, and it makes sure that they're not undervaluing what the change order results are. So to give you a sense of what that looks like, so we're back in a view of estimate here, and here's what your typical bid might look like. You've got your pay items, got a short list of them, got some indirect items, and it's just very kind of normal. But when I go and click my new change order button, that'll let me create a change order in the estimate. Now, rather than just a PANMS node, I've got them broken out by base bid and change orders, and I can see my new change order down here, where it has its own PADMs. I can put its own indirects in, its own cost groups, all that stuff. Essentially, what we've done is we've made change orders an estimate within an estimate. They're full-fledged, fully functional areas where you can cost them separately, you can price them separately. Maybe when you were doing the original bid, you had to have really tight margins to win it. But now that you've got the change order, you can account for, you can put in a little bit more profit, you can put in a little bit more overhead. There's not anything you can't do with a change order that you could do with the base bid. And by having them together, you never have to worry that one's being lost or one's being omitted or one's forgotten. You can even take the ones via the status feature that get rejected, where you put work into figuring out what the costs were going to be. Maybe the owner rejects it today, but then is going to pick it up, going to reconsider tomorrow. It's just a way to make sure that all that information is captured in one place. Again, it's part of the centralization. You shouldn't have to go searching for things. You shouldn't wonder where they are. Looking kind of outside and beyond estimate, that estimating is not an isolated activity. Alex from Steve Evans says that information from estimate links to our field tracking process automatically, which for them eliminates the added work and the inconsistencies with re-entering data. And that's a huge thing. One thing computers do well is transfer data from one place to another, or make copies of data. Asking as people us to enter the same data in twice is asking for mistakes. I'm going to put the information in my Excel spreadsheet, and then I'm going to get it into some field tracking software that I have. There's a virtual guarantee if you have a person do that, what's in the spreadsheet is going to be different than what's in the field tracking software or what's in your accounting software, because we don't do well with entering in large quantities of numbers. It's just not something that, you know, a computer is going to do badly and a person's going to do well. It's quite the reverse. The other thing is, by having the same information in both places, being able to monitor and report on any aspect of the job, to be able to compare, okay, here's what I'm actually doing, but here's what I estimated I would do. It can be kind of critical, because maybe you think you're doing great, but what you're producing isn't even close to what you estimated. So all of the money that you thought you were going to make is going away because you're not living up to what the estimator thought it was. And that might not be the field crew's problem. That might be something that needs to be communicated back to the estimators of, you know, the next time you estimate this, here's what the actuals versus the estimated were. Make sure that your estimates are closer to what the actuals turned out to be. So I said the data from your estimates needs to be in more places than just your bid form. It needs to go to your ERP or to your accounting system. It needs to go to field tracking, to scheduling and dispatching, and to project management. So here's an example of how, and this is just a direct export to Microsoft Project, meaning when you send out if you export an estimate out to Project, what you'll get is this kind of fully loaded, all of the items, all of your crews, all resource loaded with their durations, all set up so that you can go and say, this is how they should be scheduled. It's almost a click of a button to go from this is the information in estimate to now I can see it in Project and I can start doing my project planning there. No manual data entry, and nothing's forgotten or left out. So one of the things that can kind of worry people is this is a brand new software. I'm going to have to learn so much. It's going to be a lot of work to get set up in this. There's so much data here. We've been doing this since '93. Our implementation and training group is extremely familiar with bringing people up to speed quickly and easily. So as Larry says, they should be inducted into the Hall of Fame. We've helped literally thousands of estimators switch from Excel to B2W Estimate. We've focused, throughout our history on making the system as intuitive as possible. We've been constantly improving the implementation process so that it can be clear and structured, and we can help you build the database, or we can get the information from you to build the database that has your resources, your items, all of that in it. As part of every deal, we offer comprehensive training, so we can send a trainer in to teach your people not just how to use the software, but how to use the software best. Honestly, you can probably sit down at Estimate and poke around and figure it out yourself, because like I said, it is intended to be intuitive, but there's such a wealth of features in it. It can be really handy to have someone who can understand your business needs and speak to, this is the easiest, simplest, quickest way that you can meet those with this software. And last and certainly not least is we have 24/7, 365 support. If you have any problems or even just questions, the support team is there. They're happy to help you. We will make sure that you're able to do with the software what you need to do. If you run into any problems, they're always there to help you resolve them, and you're basically in good hands with our support team. So I'm going to thank you for showing up, and hope that you have a very nice day.